Yo people, so it's February, unless it's not, obviously, and I think it's around this time of year that people start to wonder, particularly people who decided to lose some fat as their New Year's resolution, how long does this stuff take? Am I ever gonna be the ultimate turbo shredded Giga Chad that I so desire to evolve into? Have I even got any abs under that fat, and how long is it gonna take to get rid of it? These are all pretty normal questions. I think it's human nature to be somewhat impatient and wonder how long stuff's gonna take, you know, whether you're trying to become flexible or learn the violin or become a master in water polo. Anyway, I'm gonna try and answer how long that is going to take, not the polo one, the one about how long it'll take to see your abs. So really it's dependent on four main things: how much fat you've got to lose, how fast you can lose that fat, your fat distribution, and how developed your abs are. So I'm going to talk about each of these things one by one and try and put them together and enable you to get some kind of realistic timeline. First, how much fat do you have on you? I don't think we need to talk too much about this. I think it's quite obvious. It almost goes without saying. If you've got more fat on you, it's probably going to take you longer to lose enough of that fat to be able to see your abs. So I don't think we're going to win any Nobel Prizes for that. Let's move on to the next one. Nobel Prize in getting people shredded. I should win that. Alright, second, how fast can you lose fat? It's possible to lose fat, like really, really fast. Yeah, you could climb Kilimanjaro without rations. You could take up crystal meth as a recreational hobby. You could, I don't know, stop washing until you contract dysentery, right? Obviously, I'm being ridiculous. So let's put aside all methods of fat loss that lead to imminent death, along with like just other extreme and unhealthy measures like, you know, becoming overly dependent on stimulants or making those pizzas that have got cauliflower as a base. No one should be doing that one, you know what I mean? Even with those aside, there's still quite a wide range of what could be considered healthy weight loss. So we have two main things to say about this. First, fat loss isn't linear. The more you have, the faster you can lose it. So it's not going to be as simple as saying I have 10 pounds of fat roughly to lose before I can probably see my abs. If I lose 1 pound a week, it'll take me 10 weeks, right? You could do that as an average calculation, but for everybody, you're going to lose more at the beginning, and then the rate is going to slow as you get leaner. The second thing to mention is that losing weight too fast puts lean tissue at risk of being broken down, aka muscle loss. So if you care about that, then you might have to lose weight a little bit slower than somebody else who doesn't care about it. There's quite a well-known paper by some of the natty bodybuilding science community overlords from back in 2014 that states, and I quote, "Caloric intake should be set at a level that results in body weight losses of approximately 0.5 to 1% per week to maximize muscle retention." So this recommendation kind of ties in both points. Firstly, it's based on the principle of trying to retain muscle, tick, and secondly, since it's given as a percentage, it means your weight loss should be faster to begin with and slower as you get leaner. So let's just leave this here for now and we'll come back to it later. Next up, what is your fat distribution like? So this is probably something that's a little bit overlooked. There are general differences between the sexes. Men tend to be more apple-shaped, whereas women tend to be more pear-shaped. That's related to hormones. But even within the same sex, there's still quite a lot of variation on how people carry the fat. This is most obvious when you look at the fattest people, right? So obese or morbid, I don't know how many grades of, how many levels to obese. There's like 9th dan obese these days. But when you look at really obese people, you can see it's most obvious. Some carry it all around the midsection, some in the limbs more, etc., right? Even not looking at obese people, you can just search on YouTube for all the fitness people who've done DEXA scans and you see the ratio of where they carry their body fat, because it does give you measurements for each limb, torso, left side, right side, and you'll see that they still vary between person to person, even from the same sex. Now this is why body fat can sometimes be a bit pointless to talk about. Two people could be pretty much the exact same body composition, but still appear very differently. It's probably most apparent to talk about in terms of females. One could carry very little fat on her abdomen and just mainly around the butt and upper thighs. Another could carry very little on the legs and just around the midsection, right? Although they might be the exact same body composition, one just purely through, you know, look and genetics might be traditionally deemed attractive and can probably sell a booty guide, you know, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. Maybe there is, who knows. Play to your strengths, I suppose. I'm not here to get like moral on people. The point is, it's just pure luck and there's nothing you can really do about it. Now, I'm probably quite lucky in that I store my fat, when I have any, around my lower back and like the back of my hips and then probably on my thighs as well. So I might be able to have visible abs at slightly higher body fat percentages than some other dudes, right? Now, if you're not so lucky, then so be it. You know, it might just take you an extra few weeks of dieting to be able to have visible abs, but really, what's a few weeks in the grand scheme of things? Finally, how developed are your abs? So this is kind of similar to how more muscular people can appear leaner at higher body fat percentages. It's just on a more localized scale, right? If you have more muscle there, even if there is a layer of fat covering it, there's still going to be more definition because there's just more shape to you overall. Now, of course, if you can't see your abs at all, then you don't really have much way of knowing if they're developed or how developed they are. However, if you're a really fat person, there might actually be a little bit of good news for you. This might be one of those rare occasions where being really fat is actually an advantage. I mean, I wouldn't say an advantage, that's a bit of a stretch, but let me explain. Right, this only applies if you're a fat person that moves, not if you're one of those ones that's like on TV, stuck in bed all day with that weird doctor guy who shouts at them.
You're trying to tell me that almost 30 pounds just magically appeared on your body? Is that because you're a pathological liar or what? So chocolate is more important to you than living, apparently.
Sick dude him. He's also kind of fat though. Anyway, in the same way that fat people tend to have really good calf development because they're literally pushing a heavier weight around, they probably have somewhat strong, somewhat developed abs underneath there because you're constantly stabilizing and moving around a heavier weight, right? So it's kind of akin to how bodybuilders can sometimes get away with not really training abs that much and they're still quite developed. Like obviously steroids gear aside, they're still moving around, stabilizing constantly a heavier weight because it doesn't matter if you're heavy because you're fat or you're heavy because you're muscular. It's still going to go towards developing things like your calves, things like your abs. Now, I think a lot of people, myself included, are probably guilty of neglecting abs a lot of the time and neglecting ab training because it's quite boring, isn't it? I think it's boring anyway. And then it's usually not until we are quite lean or 2 weeks away from a holiday that we remember, hang on a minute, abs are actually like a muscle group, we should probably train them. That's kind of the wrong way around, the wrong way of doing it, isn't it? I mean, you should be sowing your seeds in winter to reap, harvest them in summer or spring or whenever you harvest stuff. I suppose it depends on the crop, but just wandered onto agriculture YouTube. The point is, you should be focusing on building your abs when you're building muscle generally. So again, the bottom line is the more developed your abs, the quicker you'll be able to see them, obviously. Okay, so I think we should run through an example, and bear in mind, this is all very rough. There are just so many variables to kind of consider that it's hard to get an exact time scale on anything really. It's hard to talk in any kind of absolutes really, but I'm going to try and give some kind of example and hopefully you find it somewhat reasonable. Let's take a 170 pound person at 20% body fat. That means they have 34 pounds of body fat. The American Council of Exercise says that you need to be between 6 to 13% body fat to see your abs if you're male. I think that seems low, but it's hard to even talk about body fat percentage accurately because different methods of measurement tend to skew higher or lower than others. Let's say that if our person has a favourable fat distribution and quite developed abs, they might need to get down to around 14% body fat. And if they don't, they might need to get all the way down to 10% body fat before they can see their abs. I can't really imagine anyone needing to get below 10% before they can see any abs. If they lost 12 pounds of pure fat, they'd be 158 pounds with 22 pounds of fat mass. This is almost exactly 14% body fat, but that's unrealistic because we know that weight loss is usually a combination of glycogen, water, muscle, and fat. So how much weight do we have to lose in order to lose roughly 12 pounds of body fat? Let's say we're following a good training program, sleeping well, consuming enough protein, and sticking to a number of calories that gives the 1% average weight loss from our earlier recommendation. We can then assume 0 or nearly 0 muscle loss. This is actually perfectly realistic and has been observed in many studies, although admittedly a fairly optimistic estimate. So a typical person will store around 500 to 600 grams of glycogen in their liver and muscles, which can of course vary widely and will be more if you have more muscle mass. For every 1 gram of glycogen stored, we store about 2.6 to 3 grams of water. So if we add that all together, that's about 4 pounds of glycogen and water weight to factor in. And we know from the obscene weight cuts that UFC fighters do that it's perfectly possible to lose more water weight than this, but for that you do have to severely dehydrate yourself, and we're not going to do that, obviously. You're also unlikely to ever actually completely deplete all glycogen stores, but you can probably get pretty close. So we know this person needs to lose about 12 pounds of fat to reach roughly 14% body fat, and to lose about 12 pounds of fat, they're probably going to have to lose around 16 pounds of total body weight. So if we follow the recommendation of losing 0.5 to 1% of total body weight per week, how many weeks will it take to lose around 16 pounds? Let's try with the upper limit of 1% per week. After 1 week, they would weigh 168.3 pounds, then 166.6, then 164.9, and after 10 weeks, they would be weighing in at 153.7 pounds. So if we assume that 4 pounds of their 16 pound weight loss is water and glycogen, that means they now have a fat mass of 22 pounds, putting them at roughly 14% body fat. So the earliest this person could see their abs would be after 10 pretty solid weeks of dieting, if all went very well. If they were unfortunate with fat distribution and didn't really have much ab development, then they might have to get down to 10% body fat, which would take them another 4 weeks or so. So the quick way to work this out for yourself is to work out how many pounds of fat you need to lose to get down to 10 to 14% body fat, and that's depending on whether you think you have a good fat distribution and developed abs or not. Once you've got a number for how much fat you have to lose, add 3 to 6 pounds onto it to account for glycogen and water weight, depending on how much muscle mass you have. I feel like from personal experience, I probably lose a bit more than 4 pounds this way, because I can often drop 10 pounds in a couple of weeks, which is obviously majority water and glycogen. You may have seen this if you've watched any of my 10 or 14 day mini cut videos. Once you have that number, take it away from your weight and figure out how many times you have to multiply your body weight by 0.99 until you hit it. And that's how many weeks it should take you. You might want to use 0.75% instead of 1% average weight loss per week, but I personally feel 1% is quite doable without losing any noticeable muscle. So obviously that's very rough. We definitely cut a few corners for the sake of brevity, but not ones that I think are particularly consequential. We also made some pretty strong assumptions, stuff like not nosediving into a 3-day binge, stuff like assuming that people are going to actually achieve consistent weight loss, right? So at the end of the day, everyone is a human, and there are also going to be massive variations in the kind of body fat percentage you're going to be at before you can see your abs, how much water weight you can lose, etc, etc. Nonetheless, hopefully it still, gives you some kind of guideline of what to expect and helps at least a little bit, right? At the end of the day, it's going to take as long as it takes, which is, probably one of the most pointless statements I've ever made in my life. So I'm going to leave the video here. Like it for me, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you later.
Jordy Lenny is my hero.